Disclaimer: this content is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised. The rain hadn't stopped since morning. The house felt colder than usual, quiet except for the steady hum of the dryer and the soft rhythm of droplets against the window. I stood there, towel draped over my shoulders, trying to fix the tangled mess of my hair. The storm had cut the power earlier, and when it finally came back, the air inside still carried that damp chill. I didn't hear him walk in at first, just the faint sound of footsteps and then his voice, calm but curious. "Need help?" he asked. There was something in the way he said it, not too casual, not too serious, just enough to make me pause. He'd grown up so fast lately. Taller, broader, quieter. There was a time I used to scold him for leaving his shoes by the door, and now, somehow, he was standing there like a man I barely recognized. Still, it felt harmless. Just a kind offer. I nodded, pretending not to notice the awkward silence stretching between us. He took the dryer from my hand, moving behind me. The warm air brushed against my neck as his fingers separated the strands carefully. For a moment, everything slowed down, the sound of rain, the faint scent of shampoo, even my own breathing. It should have been nothing, just a small, ordinary moment. But something shifted in that quiet. It wasn't what he did. It was how he did it, gentle, deliberate, as if each motion carried something unspoken. My pulse picked up, not because of fear, but because I didn't know what to feel. I wanted to turn, to say something light, to laugh it off, but I couldn't. There was a strange electricity in the air, one that neither of us seemed ready to name. Maybe it was the closeness. Maybe it was just the weather, that kind of heavy, trapped feeling storms bring. Or maybe it was something deeper we had both been ignoring. Whatever it was, it lingered there, thick and quiet. Then, just as his hand brushed lower, he froze. I could see his reflection in the mirror, wide-eyed, uncertain. The air between us felt heavy with questions neither of us wanted to ask. And then came the sound of the front door unlocking. We both turned, startled, breath caught. Someone was home. That moment, that heartbeat of tension, hung in the air, unfinished. Whatever was about to happen next would change everything. What do you think happened after the door opened? Should they face what they were feeling or step away before it's too late? Tell me in the comments what you would do if you were standing there. The front door clicked open, followed by the sound of wet shoes against the floor. He stepped back quickly, pretending to fix the cord of the dryer while I grabbed the towel and wrapped it around my shoulders. My heart raced so fast I could hear it in my ears. It wasn't guilt exactly, more like confusion, the kind that comes when something innocent suddenly doesn't feel so innocent anymore. His father's voice echoed faintly from the hallway, calling out a casual greeting. The warmth that had filled the room moments ago turned into a cold silence. I mumbled something about checking dinner and walked out before the silence became too heavy to breathe in. That evening passed slowly. The rain kept falling, the lights flickered now and then, and I tried to focus on anything but what had just happened. But every time I looked at him, sitting across the table, quiet, eyes focused on his plate, I could feel that same invisible current humming between us. It was like a secret neither of us wanted but couldn't deny existed. Later, while everyone was asleep, I found myself staring at my reflection in the dark window. How did things even get here? I'd known him since he was a teenager, awkward, shy, full of questions about everything. But now, he wasn't that boy anymore. Somewhere along the way, he'd changed, and maybe I had too. The next morning, the storm had cleared. The air was fresh, almost too bright after such a heavy night. He was already in the kitchen, making coffee. The sunlight hit his face just right, calm, grounded, as if nothing had happened. He looked up and smiled, and I felt that small, unwanted flutter again. "About last night," he started, voice low. I froze. My hands trembled just a little as I reached for a mug. Nothing happened, I said too quickly. It was just, yeah, he cut in, looking away. Just the storm. But the way he said it told me he didn't believe that any more than I did. Days went by, and life went back to normal, or at least it looked that way from the outside. But inside, something had changed. There were glances that lasted too long, moments of silence that said too much. I started avoiding being alone in the same room, yet somehow we always ended up there, the kitchen, the hallway, the living room, caught in the same quiet space where words didn't seem to work anymore. Each time it happened, it felt like the universe was testing us, pushing us closer just to see if one of us would step back. But neither of us did. And then one evening, when the power went out again and the house was bathed in candlelight, I heard his footsteps coming down the hall. Slow. Certain. The candlelight flickered across the walls, casting soft shadows that moved with every small sound. The storm outside had returned, louder this time, as if reminding us that the world beyond that quiet house still existed. He stood by the doorway, hesitating, the faint glow tracing the sharpness of his face. I could sense his uncertainty, the same one that lived in me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was heavy, but not empty. It carried everything we'd been avoiding, the questions, the tension, the unspoken pull that neither of us could name. I told myself to walk away, to pretend this moment didn't exist, but something in his eyes made it impossible. He finally broke the silence, his voice soft. "You've been avoiding me." I tried to smile, but it came out shaky. "No, just busy." He didn't answer, just looked at me, really looked, in that way that makes you feel seen and cornered all at once. The air between us felt warmer than the flickering candle could explain. I took a step back, trying to put space between us, but he didn't move. "I just don't want things to be weird," I said quietly. "They already are," he replied. That honesty stung, maybe because it was true. Every glance, every word, every moment we pretended nothing had changed only made it clearer that everything had. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. The rain had softened, but the thoughts in my head hadn't. I kept wondering if what I was feeling was wrong, or just human. Maybe both. The next day, his father mentioned an upcoming work trip, a few days away from home. I nodded, pretending not to notice the way the room suddenly felt smaller. It wasn't about opportunity. It was about temptation, the kind that waits quietly in the corners of the house, whispering what-ifs. When he left for the trip, the silence that filled the house wasn't peaceful. It was the kind that demanded attention. I tried to distract myself, cleaning, reading, staying busy, but every time I turned around, I saw small reminders of him. His jacket on the chair. His cup on the counter. The faint echo of his laughter from just days ago. That night, I heard footsteps again. For a second, I thought I was imagining things. Then a voice, soft, careful, came from the hallway. "Can we talk?" The question hung in the dark like a challenge. I knew that whatever I said next would decide what direction this story would take. The hallway was dim, the only light coming from the faint glow of a lamp in the living room. His voice still echoed in my ears, "Can we talk?" I stood frozen by the door, unsure if answering would make things better or worse. My heart thudded so loud it almost drowned out the rain outside. I finally opened the door. He stood there, one hand behind his neck, looking nervous but determined. There was a weight between us, one built from everything unsaid over the past few days. I could see he had rehearsed this moment, every word, every breath. "I just need to clear the air," he said softly. "I don't want this silence to ruin what we have." I nodded, not trusting my voice. He took a step closer. "Ever since that night, I've been trying to act normal. But it's not. Nothing feels normal anymore. The air grew tighter, the distance between us smaller. The flickering lamp made his expression look almost uncertain, like he was caught between what he wanted to say and what he shouldn't say. You don't have to explain, I whispered, trying to stay calm. Some things are better left unspoken. But what if keeping quiet makes it worse, he asked. His question hit deeper than I expected. I turned away, staring at the rain streaking down the window. My reflection looked pale, restless, almost like a stranger's. You think saying it out loud will make it go away? I said quietly. It won't. He sighed, running his hand through his hair. Then what do we do? Keep pretending nothing's happening? I didn't answer. Maybe pretending was safer. Maybe silence was the only way to keep from crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The power flickered again, then went out completely. The room fell into darkness. I heard his breath catch, and instinctively, I reached for my phone flashlight. The soft beam landed on his face, close, too close. Neither of us moved. The only sound was the storm pounding against the windows. Something inside me twisted, part fear, part longing, part confusion. The tension was unbearable now, thick enough to taste. The kind of moment where everything slows down, and one wrong move could change everything. He finally whispered, "Tell me you don't feel it." I wanted to. I really did. But the words wouldn't come. The silence that followed said more than either of us could. Outside, thunder roared, sudden and sharp, breaking the moment apart. But even as the sound faded, the question lingered in the dark, unanswered and heavy. What happens when a secret you've tried to bury starts to surface on its own? Comment your thoughts below. What do you think will happen next? Will they hold back, or finally face what's been building all along? The thunder faded, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than the storm itself. The light from my phone dimmed, and in that flicker of darkness, it hit me, what just happened couldn't be undone. I turned away quickly, trying to steady my breath, but he was still there, unmoving, waiting for something I didn't know how to give. Before I could say anything, the front door opened again. My heart dropped. His father was home. Earlier than expected. I slipped the phone into my pocket, pretending to look for candles. He stepped back fast, almost too fast, his face pale in the faint light. His father's voice carried down the hallway, warm and tired, asking about dinner, the drive, the rain. I answered as normally as I could, my voice calm though my pulse was anything but. When I glanced at him again, he was already walking upstairs, quiet, avoiding eye contact. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. Later that night, while everyone was asleep, I heard a faint knock at my door. My heart froze. I didn't answer. Another knock, this time softer. Then silence. I sat awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, torn between fear and curiosity, guilt and something I didn't want to name. The next morning, he was gone. His room, empty. His father said he had left early to stay with a friend for a few days, no explanation, no message. The house suddenly felt too quiet. Every room echoed with what hadn't been said. I tried to go about my day, convincing myself that distance would fix what silence couldn't. But the truth is, it only made the questions louder. Then, a few nights later, I found something on the kitchen counter. A letter. Folded neatly, my name written in his handwriting. My fingers trembled as I opened it. It wasn't long, but every word carried weight. He said he couldn't stay under the same roof anymore, pretending nothing had changed. He said the storm had only revealed what was already there. And at the end, one line stood out, sometimes walking away is the only way to protect someone you care about. For a long time, I just stared at that sentence. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't an apology. It was both. Days passed, and life slowly returned to its dull rhythm. His father didn't suspect anything. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. Because every time it rained, every time the house grew quiet, I'd catch myself listening for footsteps that never came. And then one afternoon, a message appeared on my phone. Unknown number. Just a few words. I need to tell you something before I go. No name, but I didn't need one. I knew exactly who it was. The message came with a location, a small cafe near the edge of town. I stared at it for a long time, unsure if meeting him again would close a chapter or reopen something that should have stayed buried. The cafe was quiet when I arrived, the kind of place where time seemed to slow down. The rain had returned, light but steady, tapping against the window like a familiar rhythm. I spotted him sitting near the corner, his hood pulled up, a cup of coffee untouched in front of him. For a second, I almost turned back. But something inside me wouldn't let me. When he looked up, our eyes met, and all the distance from the past days vanished in that instant. There were no rehearsed words, no polite greetings, just a silence that carried everything we'd been avoiding. He motioned for me to sit. I did. My hands trembled slightly as I wrapped them around the warm cup. Neither of us spoke for a long while. Then he finally said, "I wasn't going to call you. But there's something I found out about my dad." I frowned, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" He leaned forward, his voice low but steady. "He's been planning to leave." "He didn't tell you, did he?" "There's someone else." The words hit harder than I expected. I blinked, unsure whether to believe him. "You're mistaken," I said automatically. He shook his head. I saw the messages on his phone before he left for his last trip. "I didn't want to tell you then, but you deserve to know." I felt the ground shift beneath me. All the guilt, the confusion, the restraint, it all seemed meaningless now. A wave of anger and disbelief washed over me, followed by something I didn't expect, relief. Suddenly, everything made sense, the distance, the late nights, the calls he took in another room. He watched me carefully, almost afraid of how I'd react. "I didn't tell you to hurt you," he said. I just couldn't keep it in anymore. For the first time in weeks, I exhaled. The tension that had been sitting heavy in my chest finally cracked open. "Thank you for telling me," I whispered. We sat there quietly, the weight between us shifting into something calmer, something real. Maybe what had drawn us together wasn't attraction, it was loneliness. The kind that finds another lost soul in the same storm. As I stood to leave, he stopped me. "I think he's coming back tonight," he said, eyes steady. "And I think you should be the one to decide what happens next." That night, when I returned home, the house felt different. The storm outside grew louder, and headlights swept across the driveway. I stood by the window, heart racing, waiting to see who stepped out. It wasn't him. It was someone else. A woman. The woman stood in the rain for a moment before walking to the door. I froze, every thought racing through my head at once. When I opened it, she smiled faintly, not the kind of smile that hides secrets, but one that carries quiet exhaustion. "I think we need to talk," she said gently. Inside, the air felt heavier. She introduced herself as someone who worked with him, his business partner. But it didn't take long for the truth to unfold. She wasn't there because of him. She was there because he'd already left. For good. A one-way ticket, an empty account, and a message that said he needed space. It was strange how pain can mix with relief. I didn't cry. Maybe because deep down, I had already known. The silence, the distance, the way he'd stopped looking me in the eyes, it was all leading to this. The woman apologized, said she thought I should know. Then she left, leaving only the echo of her heels and the faint scent of rain. Later that night, I sat by the window again, the same spot where it all began. The storm had finally passed. I thought about him, the one who had stayed honest when everything else felt like a lie. Maybe his truth was what saved me in the end. Days turned into weeks. Life slowly found its rhythm again. The house didn't feel haunted by what happened anymore, just quieter, wiser. Sometimes I'd get a message from him, short and simple, checking in. And though the past still lingered in corners of memory, I knew we had both learned something about love, and the kind of honesty that hurts but heals. Maybe some storms don't come to destroy. Maybe they come to reveal what was never meant to stay.